My name is Tom Owens. I'm of the class of 1973. Graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Construction Management. Or I think they called it Building Construction then. I grew up in Victoria, Texas, and as a young man we lived in a new suburb and subdivision, and I remember as a kid sitting there getting to watch the cranes dig the ditch and put in the sewer system and the storm water, and then they'd come in and lay the streets, and then the contractor would show up and start pouring house foundations, and the framers would come, and just as a kid I would sit there and watch them, and then when they left in the evening I'd get in their scrap pile, and I knew right then that I wanted to be a builder. I then later in high school, just before high school, we moved to San Antonio, Texas, and there is where I grew up my senior year in high school, and then went to San Antonio Junior College and then to A&M. Well, I decided to go to A&M. It was not a direct path. When I was in San Antonio as a child, in high school, I went into, took a course in drafting. I took 3 years of drafting, and Miss Mount was a great drafting teacher. And in fact, my senior year, I had done a complete set of working drawing house plans for a teacher in her house upon Canyon Lake. And also, when I turned 16, I found a job working construction. I got my picky palo, and I went out and dug ditches for house foundations. And I worked with this construction firm all through high school, and even some when I was here at A&M. I knew I wanted to be a builder, and I just didn't know quite how to be a builder, And so my drafting teacher said, it's the architect that's the builder. And so I went to. I said, okay, my first semester at San Antonio Junior College, I went into architecture. Well, after mid-semester, I said, I'm not learning anything new. My drafting teacher had taught us all this so far, and so I talked with the construction company I worked with, the house foundation, and he was a UT civil engineer, and he said, it's the engineer that's the builder. And so I said, well, the next semester I went into engineering. And I remember one night sitting there figuring out how much pressure it took to push a ball up a ramp. And I said, what does this have to do with building? And so I started looking. And then that's when I learned about the building construction program here in the College of Architecture at Texas A&M. So the next semester I came to A&M and enrolled in construction science here. When I was here at A&M, they encouraged us to be part of the different student organizations, and so I became part of the Student Association of Associated General Contractors, and they would have guest speakers come in, and a fellow by the name of John Harris came in to talk to the student chapter, and he worked for Hines. And Hines was a small Houston developer that had just completed One Shell Plaza in Houston and the Galleria in Houston. And he described what he did. And that's what I want to do. That's exactly what I wanted to do. And so that is why I went down the path of, when I graduated, looking for a job with Hines. Being out of A&M, I went to work for Hines in Houston, and I just imagined myself being the construction manager on a high-rise office building, and that's not where they started me. They started me doing what we call tenant construction management, and what that involved was meeting with a tenant who had just signed a lease for new office space, and it was my task to meet with the tenant, to have him describe his program. How many offices did he need? What size offices? How many conference rooms? Gathering that information. And we'd bring in then a space planner who would lay that out in this vacant space. And then it was my job to help advise the tenant on about what it was going to cost. So that means I needed to talk to contractors. I needed to talk to electricians and mechanical contractors and drywall contractors to get a price. And so with that estimate, I would sit down and talk to the tenant and say, this is about what it's going to cost. Are you satisfied with that? Is this the right layout? And then I would need to go hire an architect who would create the working drawings. We'd have to hire a mechanical and electrical engineer who would lay out and create the working drawings necessary to build the tenant space. Well, then you had to go back to the contracting community. You had to get a bid. That means you worked with all the different subs. And I started to see that really this is a collaborative process. While I was a builder, I needed that space planner. I needed to listen to that tenant to understand what his objectives were. And then once you get it priced out and you try to get it built, you try to help work with the tenant and help him anticipate the things that he needs to do. And all of a sudden I found myself working with his data person, the telephone company, his computer company. And so all of a sudden, I realized that there were a large number of people involved in the process of getting this tenant moved in. So collaboration, working with others was key. But also part of collaboration is communication. I realized that not everybody had the same goal that I had. My goal was a happy tenant paying rent. And that wasn't necessarily their goal and objective. And so it was important to not only work with them, but help them see what our ultimate goal and objective was. So communication is very much a part of collaboration. And a large part of that is listening to what the tenant wants and giving him what he desires. Well, after my first year in tenant construction management, I was allowed then to be a construction manager on a high-rise project. And Jim Lawson is the man that I think of that had a lot to do with my mentoring me. He probably didn't even have a high school education, but boy, he knew how to put things together and get things built. And he took me under his wings. And I'd come in, or he'd call me over to the job and says, Tom, you see these plans? I want you to go out there and look in the field and see what really exists. Now, how are we going to solve this? Well, okay, Jim, I'm construction manager. I'll give you some direction as superintendent. So I would get on the phone with the architect and the engineer, and then I'd kind of come up with a solution. And an hour later, I'd sit down with Jim and say, Jim, here's the way to do it. And he'd say, okay. And he said, but Tom, have you thought about this? Have you looked at it this way? And I realized he knew the answer all along, but he was mentoring me. He was helping me learn and think. And so that was, no question, he was a great mentor. I was blessed to be each Monday in meetings with Mr. Hines, where we would walk through the different projects that we had going on. And, he would point out things and direct things and what we were trying to accomplish that week. Another mentor is, of course, John Harris, who hired me and who was a great Aggie and the one that I came and spoke to me when I was a student in the Associated General Contractors Association, and who I went to go see when I wanted a job. So I've been blessed to have some great mentors. I'll tell you that one of the things, we talked about collaboration of the different professionals in the built environment, but there's a whole another group that are involved in getting something built. And that's the finance side, and that's the marketing. And those were two areas that I hadn't had much exposure to. Even though the construction program here in the College of Architecture, it's great because you take some architectural, you take some engineering, you do take definitely construction courses, but you take some business courses. But I realized that to really be better at what I enjoyed doing, and that was being a builder, I was lacking certain fundamental skills and knowledge, and I felt I needed to go back and to go back to school. I was allowed by Hines to go to UT and work in the property management, which was a great education because it it taught me to understand when you build something, you got to live with it at some point. And in property management, I got to see some of the things that I hadn't done right in the projects that I had built, and I swore I wasn't going to do that again. I was going to make sure that when I turned over a building, it was operational and would run correctly. Now, you talk about being an Aggie at University of Texas. I stood up. I'm an Aggie, 100%. I just happened to go to UT to get my MBA, and I remember standing up before the Thanksgiving game that A&M would beat the hell out of TU, and I was lucky because both years we were able to do that, and that was. There's probably not many times that's true, but I happened to be at UT when that happened. I want to start with you talking about taking in the importance of courage. Should I go to Cincinnati? You know, we were a Houston-based firm. Houston is our home. I didn't know what cornfield Cincinnati was in. Patty, my wife and I, Patty, were Texans, and here I was going to haul her away, but had an understanding in 2 years I would be back home. Went to Cincinnati, built a 500,000 square foot bank building there, and they wanted me to open up the San Francisco office. Well, I was supposed to go back to Texas. Well, this is an opportunity for you. And I was the first project manager to ever live outside of Houston for Hines. Was that the right career move? Was this the right thing for me to do? And so it took some real courage to tell my wife we're moving to Cincinnati, and then after we were there, we're not coming home. We're going to go to San Francisco and open up Hines on the West Coast. And I look back and say, boy, what a great opportunity that was. And then moved to Boston to open up the New England office. And I realized that the economy had turned down here in Texas in the late 80s, early 90s, and fortunately I had moved around and had avoided a lot of that slowdown that was occurring across the commercial real estate industry and the office market. So I was fortunate to be part of the team at Hines who looked at, well, what are we going to do? Goldman Sachs was saying there didn't need to be another office building built for 15 years. And yet that's what we were. We're office developers. And so we worked with a consulting group there that was made up of some professors from Harvard. And I happened to be in Boston, so it worked out great. And we decided that we could acquire buildings. Why limit ourselves to the United States market? Let's go internationally. And so I was allowed to spend a month in China looking at China as a possible place for Hines to go. I spent time in Brazil trying to understand the Brazilian market and was it ready for Western development in Brazil. And while I did not live in either one of those places, eventually Hines did open offices in those based on research that I was allowed to be a part of. Probably the most interesting assignment was while I was living in Boston for 1 year, I commuted to Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And you talk about being a very different culture and the building requirements and what were needed to keep men and women separated. And I worked for Prince Walid, who is one of the wealthy princes in the royal family. And he wanted to build this galleria in Riyadh. And for 1 year, I worked there with HOK trying to figure out how it would work given the culture and the religion of Saudi Arabia. It was very interesting. Eventually, that project did not get built. And the reason that it didn't get built is Prince Walid, with all his wealth and his standing in the royal family, couldn't get the zoning for that project. And so that was probably a very educational, interesting, eye-opening time for me. The Heinz formula for success is basically pretty simple. Number one, start out with great design. Second is to execute with quality workmanship and materials. And then third is to provide a service your product. And to create a great design, you need to build a team of great and special people who are outstanding in their field. I've been blessed to work with Philip Johnson, Robert Stern, Caesar Pelly, HOK, Skidmore, Owens and Merrill, John Bacard. And they are very creative people. Then you got to turn around and build a team of architects or contractors. And that been working with great contractors like Turner and Clark and Beck and Lynn-Lease. So great people. And if you help them be successful and bring out the best of them, then that allows you to be competitive, to compete. Now, part of competing is listening. And what I mean by that is to understand what the objective of your customer is. They may not know completely, so it's listening, it is taking from that, and then communicating back to them in a way that it sends off a light in their mind and saying, yeah, we're together. You know exactly what I want. And so that is part of competition. Now, one thing that is not part of competition, and Mr. Heinz taught us this from the beginning, is we do not talk about our competitors. If we can't say something nice, we don't say anything at all. We try to get the business by focusing on what we can do to answer what they want. And when we lose something usually to a competitor, it's usually because they listened better. They communicated what their customer wanted to hear, what the customer wanted to hear. And part of competition, of course, is being creative. I remember 101 California, one of the first project that I did on the West Coast. Philip Johnson was the designer, and he wanted to, in the elevator cabs, he wanted to have stone. Well, stone you can buy from Italy is 2 centimeters thick. The weight of that, though, was going to cause us to have to increase the size of the elevator machines. And that wouldn't work in the budget, which would allow us to be competitive with the rental rate in San Francisco. I liked the idea. I thought it would make us iron our product better or more distinctive and different. And so, what if, what we finally decided we'd do, or what we decided we'd do in the budget and going forward, is we would allow Philip Johnson to select exotic wood veneers, and we would have wood in the elevator cabs. He wanted to have each elevator cab to have a different wood. And I decided, okay, we'll carry that in the budget, but let me spend some time trying to find a solution to how I can get stone in my elevator cabs, because that's what the architect wanted. And I felt that we could do something to do this. And so what I started working with our fabricator, and we went to Italy and we started talking to different fabricators, and how can I take 2 centimeter stone, which is the normal way you slice blocks of stone, of onyx and marbles. How could I slice it so that it would be only 1 centimeter? And if it was just 1 centimeter thick, then I wouldn't have to upgrade my machines. I could give Philip Johnson what he wanted and what he thought would be best in the marketplace. And it took me a while, but we found somebody who would experiment with a block, and we came up with a solution to how to cut slabs down to 1 centimeter thick. And for 4 or 5 buildings after 101 California in the Heinz system, we used that method, and we were able to do that before the competition caught on to what we were doing. So what our focus is in trying to be competitive is to be better. And that requires competitiveness. I think of an example of our general contractors. We lay out for them how we're going to, the basement and how deep the hole needs to be. We'll even suggest a retention system as we, build the basement and dig the hole. But it's the contractor that has a different scheme, a different method of constructing that hole and building that basement, that his creativity has to come out. He has to think outside the box. And I think that competition and creativity go hand in hand. I define character as treating others the way you would want to be treated. And that's the golden rule that you probably learned growing up from your mother. But it's so true. Whoever you meet, whether it is the CEO of the company or whether it is the project manager or the superintendent or that laborer who's sweeping out the floor, if you had their job, how would you want to be treated? And in order to get the best out of someone, it's important for them to feel that what they're doing is important to you. And so that's when someone makes me feel important to them and what I'm doing is important to them, I'm going to give them my best. And that's the way I would want to be treated if I were that janitor sweeping the floor. And so developing a sense of character and operating that way in your business life, in your home, and in the marketplace, and in your community is critical. No one asked me who I wanted my parents to be. No one asked me whether I wanted to be born in the United States or I wanted to be born in South Africa. And yet I can tell you that if you're here at Texas A&M, you are blessed beyond the vast majority of the people in the world. And you need to, and you've got to ask yourself, why? Why was I given so much? And it's not for my consumption. Yes, I need to enjoy what I do, but and enjoy some of the fruits of my labor. But it really is for others. There is a true statement, and it says it's better to give than to receive. And if you doubt the truth of that statement, try it. I just dare you to try it and see if you're not the one who gets the majority of the benefit. And so there's great benefit in being part of the community and giving back. If you have a project and you're building in a neighborhood, in a community, you are in the built environment, there are people around you, your neighbors. And it's important to engage them and help them have a sense that you are interested in leaving the place, the community, better than when you found it. And if they sense that that truly is your desire and that's your intent, when you need them, when you have to work after hours and the permit doesn't, your contract doesn't let you, but you need to catch up, they'll be understanding of the noise if you have served them before asking something. So it can be selfish even somewhat to reach out to your neighbors, your community, in which you're building in. As you can tell, my accent doesn't sound like it's from Boston. And I lived in Boston 11 years, and I was an outsider. But they began to accept me after I got involved in helping them put together the plans and helping buy out and construct the community park, working with the different people. And they saw that I cared about the built environment in which we were working in. And so that is, I think, giving back and being part of community is very important. I think I addressed a lot of that question previously. The benefit, I think, is that I think we all should have the desire to leave this world better than when we came. I mean, that is part of what we're about and we should be about. And that's very much a part of character, the treating others as you would want to be treated, truly caring about what someone's doing, taking the time to be genuine, is an Aggie tradition. And it plays over into your community. And then, and again, as I said earlier, that you get the benefit. You're the one who benefits from it, because all of a sudden your community, your neighborhood gets larger, and you'll have people across the globe that need help. And I say you take your blessings, your talent, your time, and your treasure, and you give back. And there are people who weren't as blessed as I was to be born in America, to be able to have the ability to go to A&M, the ability to live in America. And I need to give back. There's no question that when you are young and you're just getting out of A&M, the idea is, and your motive is success. You want to be able to provide for yourself and your family, and you want to be able to buy that house, and you want some of the basic things. And so you kind of measure success on how you've been able to put together in providing for yourself and your family. And then you reach that point where, what is another new car in the garage? It has less meaning to you. And so you reach that point of where you want to be significant. How am I going to be remembered? What can I do that would be remembered after I'm gone? And so you start focusing more on helping others, creating a business or creating projects that are going to last longer than you, and significance becomes important. And then at some point, and I'm getting closer to that point, where it goes from significance to sage. That is, you want to impart the wisdom, the knowledge, things you've learned to others. It's not important that I'm significant. What is important that I pass on what I've learned to others so that they can be successful, have significance, and then them turn around and do the same thing and be sage. The rate of change is at such a fast pace. It just speeds up. It gets going. It's like a snowball going down the hill. It's picking up. It's faster and faster. So what I learned yesterday, 1 year from now, may not be sufficient. So I think higher education has to, besides pointing out or helping one learn some basic vocabulary, some basic knowledge of the field they've chosen, they have to learn how. And today, in addition to there's change happening faster and faster, more and more information, more knowledge is growing. And so how do I access that knowledge? I used to go to the encyclopedia to get my research paper. Now, then I went to the library because that wasn't sufficient. They were out of date, and the library had the newest. And now you go to Google, you go to YouTube, you go online. There's so much information. So higher education has to realize that things are changing at a faster and faster pace. They have to realize that knowledge is growing at an exponential rate. And so therefore, what I got to do. How do I prepare my students not just for the job tomorrow, but how do I prepare them to work in the future? And one of the things that I think they need to do in higher education is to help you think. How do you take in all this information? What is important information and what is not important information? So that's one of the things that higher education has to do different than it has done in the past. And also, because there's so many areas of specialty and so much knowledge, it requires a great deal more collaboration, working with others. And if you can only create or be successful with what you know, and you can't share that, and you can't learn from others, you're going to find yourself to be a dinosaur. And so therefore, I think higher education has to work and teach people how to get data, how to analyze and think about that data, and then how to work with others, because they have insights that and bring perspective to things. One thing I would say about the College of Architecture at Texas A&M is they have some outstanding professors and staff who, even when I was here back in the early 70s, poured themselves into me. And because of what they did for me, they cared about me and my success. They weren't there just lecturing. They cared about it. And so I think after being out in the industry, I realized how important that was, to have professors, have staff that cared about me, that I wasn't just another number or student. And I also think A&M at the CA, in our advisory council, we try to remind educators that their product is the workforce that our industry needs, and that we need to communicate with each other to understand what we are seeing in our students that they need and what they are very proficient at. And so I just have felt it's important to give back because of what A&M did for me in helping me in my education. As I said earlier, it goes back to kind of the A&M tradition. You're an Aggie, you're my brother, and I'm going to treat you like my brother. And I don't want to see A&M lose that. Yes, I want to be great in research. Yes, I want to have a great football team. Yes, I want to do these different things. But I don't want to lose the basic foundation that A&M was built on. You know, life, it may seem like a semester goes on forever and ever, but when you get older, life starts being very short. It gets shorter. Time goes quicker. And you do think a little bit about your legacy and how do you want to be remembered. And I think that I want to be remembered as someone who gave back to my community, someone who cared. I want to leave, as I said earlier, this place, this world that I've walked on, better than when I came here. And that, I hope, can be remembered in my community, by my family. And so that's what's going to come down to what's important to me. And as I get older, that becomes more important to me. I would say never stop learning. Always try to add something to your knowledge base each day. I would encourage you to listen. You know, we're so sometimes busy that we don't stop, take time to listen and reflect. And then I would encourage you to always be curious. How can I do it better? How can I improve? Those are things that I would tell you that you shouldn't think, oh, I got my degree and I'm through. You're going to continue learning. You're going to continue to have to listen. You're going to have to continue to try to be better and improve whatever you're doing. How can I sweep this floor better? There's got to be a way. And so that is what I would encourage A&M students going forward. And one of the wonderful things you got to remember about our industry is what we do is tangible. it lasts. In fact, many of the projects will last that you work on, that you'll be involved in, part of the process, will last longer than you will. And so this goes back to leaving the world a better place. Give it your best. Treat people the way that you'd want to be treated. It will serve you well. Give back to your community. Help others be successful, and you will reap the benefit.